This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like needing the protection of an offensive guard on the football field, but getting an elementary school crossing guard. Sure, they're both guards, but you can only trust one to keep your quarterback safe when the game is on the line. So don't settle for just any insurance when there's State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Here's my 30-second story with Guinness. As soon as my sister and I get home for the holidays, we don't even unpack. We head straight to our pub. The bartender already knows our order, Guinness and fries. We laugh all night, catch up with old friends, and walk home with faces sore from smiling. It's one of my favorite nights of the year. That was my 30-second story with Guinness.
Guinness Draft Stout. Please enjoy responsibly. Imported by Diageo Beer Company, USA, New York, New York.
As part of our Coach and Coordinator Best of 2025 series, we are revisiting one of the most practical conversations of the year. This episode features Drew Dallas, head coach at Hutchinson Community College, the 2024 NJCAA Division I National Champions. Coach Dallas has built a championship program in an environment where time is limited and roster turnover is constant. In this conversation, he explains how culture holds up under pressure, why standards cannot bend with short timelines, and how teaching structure and offensive identity allow players to grow quickly. This episode is also paired with Coach and Coordinator AI, a learning companion built from this conversation. It helps you get more out of the episode and apply these ideas directly to your own coaching situation. Let's get into the conversation.
Having a system that's easy to learn, but also having a lot of variety in it is super important. I think that gives you the ability to build on the players you have, and then also your coaching staff strengths, and we've got a system here that we've used during my tenure here, but we've had multiple receiver coaches, multiple offensive line coaches or offensive coordinators, and all of those guys have brought something different to the table and what they're good at and what they want to hang their hat on.
Today on Coach and Coordinator, we welcome Drew Dallas, one of the brightest minds in small college football. As the head coach at Hutchinson Community College, Coach Dallas has built a powerhouse program, leading the Blue Dragons to multiple NJCAA national championships while developing top-tier talent. And in this episode, we're going to dive into his approach to building a championship culture, his offensive philosophy, and the keys to sustained success at the junior college level. Coach Dallas, thanks for joining us and congratulations on a national championship for your program in 2024.
Thanks, Keith. Happy to be on with you today. And it was an exciting season. So a lot of hard work and, really, really fun to end it in a championship like that.
Those are always the best seasons. So, Coach, we really want to dig into and learn from some of the things that you've had to address for a long time in that, at the junior college level, you don't have guys for a very long period. So you have to figure out real quick how you're going to build your culture. You have to be efficient with it. And even from the offensive side, which we're going to get into today, you have to build that identity pretty quickly and be able to be flexible and adjust to personnel that is constantly turning over. And that's what we see at all over college football today in the transfer portal era. But what's interesting in talking to a lot of high school coaches around the country, this is something they're dealing with too, that kids are readily leaving one place to go to another because they feel they have a better chance of playing. So that's just the world we live in. But as I said, you've been doing this for a while now, so I think there's a lot we can learn from you. And let's start with just that culture piece. It's still important. Even though you're only with these guys for 2 years or maybe 1 year, that culture is still going to be the heart of a program. Would love to hear your philosophy and how you're going to build it at the junior college level.
Yeah, I think you're right. With the transfer portal and the way, four-year football is kind of operating right now, it's a very similar model to what we've been doing at the junior college level for a long, long time. first and foremost, I was fortunate to get involved at the junior college level, with a really good coach here during my first season in 2019 and with Ryan Rhodes, and he was a veteran in the junior college level. But I think the biggest thing is getting those guys in and getting them to buy in quickly, is always the biggest challenge, and having a standard that doesn't waver on them is really key to that. I think it's easy for players or coaches to just kind of settle on, hey, culture's not going to be as strong because they're only here for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever that time frame is, right? I think the biggest thing is that shouldn't matter. We need to try to maximize that opportunity. And if they're here for 6 months, we need to get the best out of them. And the only way to do that is truly have a high standard, regardless of what the situation is. And so I think for us, demanding that we're going to have a strong culture, that's important to us, that's going to be a difference in us winning and losing ball games. And really that starts in the recruiting process with these guys, is making that known up front that this is going to be, it's not last chance it's not going to be that level of expectation that you kind of think it is coming in. There's a different standard around it. We're going to do that from the get-go. So to me, a lot of it is just being upfront and honest with these guys on what that standard is. And then each and every day, trying to uphold that.
Yeah, the standards, I think, are an important part. And when you're identifying those, these are the behaviors that you want these guys to live out. How do you go about installing those standards with your players?
I really kind of dwindle the focus down to just a day-by-day focus, and, for me as a head coach, my first year on the job, I was learning, but I was also learning through COVID. Every day was its own challenge. And so as I look back and kind of reflect on how that made me change as a coach, I think there was a lot of benefits to that because, during that time, we couldn't get caught up on the big picture. We couldn't get caught up on the outcomes or the future and what that held. Literally the sole focus was, all right, here's what we're going to do today. And a lot of times those plans changed on a dime and you had to adjust and you had to be flexible and you had to kind of refocus on what the goal was for that day. And so during that time, we had a lot of success, and I started to notice, hey, our players are they're taking well to that message, and they're buying into it. And so that was just something we continued to hammer home on, and just that daily focus. And you hear it a lot, and it's kind of cliche to say, but being 1-0 every day, being great at whatever you're doing. And, there's a lot of truth behind it. Like I tell our guys all the time, hey, we know we'll be successful if we can attack the weight room the right way every time. We know we'll be successful if we can take care of business in the classroom each and every day. And so if all those things at the end of the day, you add them all up after, 365 days a year, you're going to be pretty darn successful. And where can that get us? Not getting caught up in the results and the end game, the outcome is, but really just focusing on a daily basis of what do we need to be good at today, and understand that if we do that time over time, there's going to be a lot of deposits made and a lot of money to cash out of the bank at the end of it.
When you're looking at the culture part of it, a lot obviously is the relationship. You still have to build relationships, even though these guys may be moving out of your life, like you said, in as early as 6 months out of your program. What are the things you're coaching your staff up on to help them build those relationships in an effective and an efficient way? Again, it's not like, hey, we've got 4 years to build with this guy. That's just not the truth, really, as I said, anymore as we started the show. But what are the coaching points for you?
Yeah, well, I think first and foremost, kids are smart, like 18, 19, 20 years old, they can read through a lot of the BS. And if there's not genuineness behind that relationship, they're going to pick it out pretty quick. And so I think with our coaches, we talk about it a ton in the recruiting process, being genuine, being upfront on what our standard is, what the expectation is for guys when they get here, not selling kids on hype, not selling kids on hope, like, hey, just be genuine with them, right? And I think that starts in the recruiting process, because if you can build that level of trust, it carries over pretty quickly. And then utilizing the time leading up to report date, of them getting here to build that relationship, and then, once they're here and they're on campus, you're working with them on a daily basis. It's a lot easier to grow faster because you have a baseline built up, and I think that's where a lot of people can kind of get off track, is if that relationship's not genuine, in the recruiting process, and you're just doing whatever it takes to get a kid or whatnot, and things are different when they get on campus. Now you're starting in a hole, and you got to build that trust factor all over again. And so I think part of that starts on the front end and being able to maximize the time throughout recruiting all the way up till report date. And then when they get here, just continuing to, stress the things that matter outside of football as well, and for us, we're dealing with freshmen and sophomores, and everybody's going through it. There's not a whole lot of guys that are coming into our program with a ton of college experience, right? So everything is going to be new to these guys from the very beginning. And regardless of how well prepared they think they are for it, there's going to be some kind of transitional phase, whether that's on the football field, in their social life, in the classroom, whatever that is, being able to be a support system, for them and letting them know that, hey, it's an open door policy. And there's a lot of little things that kind of lead up to that. For instance, with our coaches, one of the first purchases I made when we got kind of renovated our facility was rubber door stops. Hey, keep your door open. When guys are rolling through the facility here, I want the doors open. I don't want it to be a place where, hey, they got to knock on the door to come into our office. They be welcoming from the get-go. And so little things like that create a lot of interaction as they're walking down the hallway, whether it's a head nod, hey, how we doing today? Class going good. Just creates conversation from the very get-go. It's not football related. It's not practice field. It's not meeting times. It's during the day and you're checking in on them. So many little things like that, but I think that starts to kind of help build that culture from early on. And there's a lot of things that, we do from a accountability standpoint, whether it's breakfast checking them, class checking them, whether you're doing grade checks and all these other things that again, are not football related. But at the end of the day, it's for their own well-being. And so for them to start to understand that, hey, why does coach, care about how I'm doing in the classroom? Why does coach care about what I'm eating in the cafeteria or that I'm on time to my first hour, at 8:00? At the end of the day, the answer is because it's going to benefit that player. It's going to benefit that kid. And I think when they realize that, hey, really the things that coach is asking us to do, they benefit our program in a roundabout way, but more importantly, they benefit their success, and so the things that we ask them to do are not extra. It's what you're supposed to do as a college football player, but at the end of the day, it's to benefit them. And I think as soon as they can see that and they realize that, it's a lot easier for them to buy into doing those things. They understand the why behind it. And at the end of the day, it's to help them be successful.
So flipping over to the X's and O's side of it, obviously this short time frame affects that as well. And prior to becoming the head coach, you were in that offensive coordinator role and you guys had a high-powered offense here for some time. For you, philosophically, what are the things that you feel are necessary to be able to run that high-powered offense, knowing that, again, we got freshmen and sophomores, or that we only have these guys for a short time frame?
Yeah, I think number one is just flexibility, and being able to be multiple in what you're doing, having a system that's easy to learn, but also having a lot of variety in it is super important. I think that gives you the ability to build on the players you have. And then, also your coaching staff strengths. We've got a system here that we've used, during my tenure here, but we've had multiple receiver coaches, multiple offensive line coaches or offensive coordinators. And all of those guys have brought something different to the table and what they're good at and what they want to hang their hat on, what they understand well and can teach well and those kind of things. And so having a system that's flexible and is easy to adapt around your personnel, not only your players, but your coaching staff and their strengths as well, I think has been a big part of that. I think you always have to evaluate. There's got to be constant evaluation and adaptation to the guys you have on campus, and then just willing to be flexible, and having a system that's easy for those guys to learn. And I think the more you can throw at them early and you kind of pick up on what their strengths are, then you kind of break it down again and start to build some wrinkles and some variations and stuff like that to what they're good at. We really take the philosophy of a whole part, whole install. Early on in their tenure here, we're going to throw a lot at them, and it's a lot of just the base stuff. And we're going to back off of that, figure out, hey, here's what we want to hang our hat on, here's what we're good at. And then we're going to start to build off of that with variations and tags and those kind of things. And then, when you look back at it at the end, hey, we've done quite a bit, and we've got a lot installed and they're all capable of doing it at a pretty high level. But yeah, you're going to build your identity, off your players and their strengths. And to me, when you got them young in their careers, that's really what you need to do to be successful, is be able to adapt to what they're good at and bring them along in the system as you go.
So the identity part of it, there's two things you mentioned to me before we got going that are important to you in doing this. And one is the quarterback position. The other is the tight end. And I think the quarterback kind of gives you that foundation. All right, what can we do? Because a lot is dictated by that guy. And then the tight ends and who they are, what they're able to do, they give you a lot of flexibility as you can start to mix and match the different guys you might get on the field. We'd love to hear a little bit about what goes into building the offensive identity built around those two positions.
Yeah, I mean, I think number one, those two positions are probably the two hardest positions to recruit in college football. To have elite guys at is that quarterback spot and the tight end spot, and I think you can get a lot of different styles of quarterbacks. You can get a lot of different styles of tight ends, and so, trying to recruit the absolute best players you can at those spots and then adapting to their strengths is really important. But the quarterback's kind of self-explanatory. Hey, what is he good at? He's touching the ball every play. What are his strengths and how can we make him efficient? Whether it's, hey, he's a really good drop back pass guy, doesn't want to run it at all, not very good at it, or whether you have, a true dual threat guy. Maybe he's elite with his legs, does just enough in the pass game to keep people honest. Maybe you have a guy that's really good and solid at everything, but not great at anything, and so how do you build around that? And then I think at the tight end position, there's just so many different types of tight ends. Is he a split out receiver? Is he a H-back? Is he an on the ball guy? It's hard to find a guy that's good at all three of those, but if you can find a guy that is, how flexible can you be? And so I think the quarterback kind of gives you the identity of maybe your style and what you're going to do. And then those tight ends really give you the identity of how you're going to do it and how you're going to attack it from a formational standpoint, from a motion standpoint, formation adjustments, all those things, and that's kind of the fun part. I feel like, those two guys in our offense have probably got to have the best heads on their shoulders because they're going to learn a lot of it, right? And obviously the quarterback always has to know everything, but the tight end's got to know every bit of run game, every bit of pass game, adjustments, the motions, and all of those things combined. So those two positions really give you your identity of who you want to be and how you can do it within our offense. I think there's always, like for us, we're always going to be able to find a really good offensive lineman, tailbacks, and receivers that fit, our system and that what we want to do. Every year that may be a little bit different, right? You may have some guys that are better in some areas at receiver play than others, and you kind of tweak it, but it doesn't change concepts as much. It doesn't change formations. Maybe just changes a little bit of your play calling. But I think when you're building it, the quarterback position, the tight end position is truly going to change, what you're doing conceptually and how you're doing it. And so that part's kind of a fun challenge every year is, hey, who do we have? What are they good at? And how do we build around it? But yeah, it's important for us to have that flexibility and the verbiage, the formations kind of in our bag that when we have guys that are good in certain areas, we can pull it out and use it. And that usually changes year to year.
This episode is brought to you by the Coach and Coordinator Network, where conversations like this one turn into applied learning for coaches at every level. If you're an offensive coach who wants to improve teaching clarity and player development, the Mushroom Society is a community built around fundamentals, structure, and shared language. Coaches use it to study the game, sharpen their teaching, and grow through collaboration. Find that at mushroom-society.com. For coaches focused on offensive structure and decision-making, the Air Raid War Room provides applied learning built around quarterback play, offensive organization, and clarity under pressure. It's designed to help coaches think better, not chase trends. Coaching Coordinator Network exists to help coaches learn, apply, and connect through trusted conversations, communities, and tools. Learn more at coachandcoordinator.com. The links to Mushroom Society and Air Raid War Room are in the show notes. Now back to the episode.
So in looking at maybe some things you've found consistent year over year, regardless of what types of quarterback, what types of tight ends, what they can do, the flexibility they allow, have you found any components of your offense that, this is pretty consistent and we do carry it no matter what these guys are, whether that's, scheme, concept, procedures, etc.?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, one of them's having a little bit of tempo built into your offense or having the ability to do it is always something that we're going to try to carry regardless of what style, of offense we're running that year. We have to have an identity of being able to run the football and being physical enough to do that. And so a lot of that goes back to, inside zone's pretty universal. We're always going to try to find a way to be, good at inside zone because it allows you a lot of flexibility within your offense, right? There's a lot of different variants you can have, a lot of different tags, whether it's we're running split zone, we're running inside zone weak, with the tight end on the ball, we have zone read options, whether it's, the triple off of that, and having some pitch relationship built in. There's a lot of different ways you can go with the zone play and zone read insert, those kind of things. So zone's a pretty consistent one from a scheme standpoint. I think for us, you look at wide zone as also being kind of one of those staples because it can be pretty universal against a lot of different fronts. And that's one thing, in the junior college setting, we've learned is you see a lot of different fronts from a defensive standpoint. You see a lot of stuff that maybe isn't consistent year to year or even game to game at times, and so having some base things that you can always hang your hat on are huge for us. So inside zone, some wide zone stuff. And then, year by year, it's going to kind of vary. Hey, do we have a little wrinkle in the pin pool action? Are we a GT and a GY team? How much power reach stuff can we run throughout the course of the year? Is speed option going to be a factor at all? Is that a wrinkle for us? So some things like that, I think, and it's all got a kind of base for us, in the run game around the zone stuff. And then in the pass game, I think you always have to be solid at quick game and rhythm throws, and the vertical shots, we're going to find ways to do that. And each year it may be a little bit different. It may be more built off of play action and RPO, and some years it may be we're really good at protecting and we can add some drop back shots in there. But I think we always have to hang our hat on being able to get the ball out quick in the quick game stuff. And then those rhythm throws where maybe it's more intermediate stuff, but hey, I'm hitting my third step and the ball's off, or 3 and a hitch and it's off, and the timing's, you're not going to be at risk for taking a lot of negative plays, in the pass game by giving up sacks. And I think that's one thing in junior college football, those defensive linemen are always going to be, a little further ahead than the offensive line because offensive line play is so technical, right? And then we're playing with freshmen and second year players, and if you're seeing a bunch of twist game and movement and blitz and you take the wrong step as an offensive lineman, you're going to get beat a lot of times, regardless of how talented you are. So being able to, still spread the field, complete passes, and doing that without taking a lot of sacks and getting the quarterback hit is a big part of that. So I think you always got to have, a solid quick game, solid rhythm throws kind of in your bag as well each and every year, regardless of what style of offense you end up running.
So you mentioned, inside zone being a universal scheme. Maybe it might be one of the most universal, right? In football, maybe hitches out on the outside the other, but there is no universal language to football, right? So you need to be good at how you're teaching things just because of the nature of you don't have these guys for long. You have to be good teachers. And I think what sets you up for success is that you put together a good structure of terminology that is very teachable. So what are the keys in how you've been able to do that you have something that these guys can learn very quickly, that terminology isn't an obstacle for these guys?
Yeah, and that's kind of evolved, over the course of my career. And I guess even going back to as a player, just trying to, relate some of the stuff that we're doing. Hey, when we use the number system, well, I always had to correlate a number to a concept, to a play call or whatever that was. And so for us, I always thought it was big early in my coaching career is I kind of took it over and started kind of formulating my own offense and those kind of things of eliminating some of that, right? Like, hey, do we need the number system? If I'm taking a number to a concept to a verb, let's just cut out the number and let's cut out the verb and call the play whatever the concept is, and then there's no correlation needed. I think signaling that, having the no huddle, there's some challenges in that as well. And so there's a lot of different ways I think you can signal some of those things, but I think the biggest thing is using terms and tags and verbs and words that kids can correlate to. For instance, like a formation tag that we have, sting and wing. And so we may have, hey, all our doubles formations, 2x2 formations all start with D words. All our trips formations start with T words. Like it's easy for them to hear a formation and know, okay, 3x1, 2x2. But then when you get to a formation tag, hey, coach put sting on it. Well, that means the strong side is in. You say wing, the weak side of the formation is in. We squeeze it and everybody does it, and so just little things like that as you're teaching it, I think if you can explain that portion to them, hey, this is why we call it sting, strong side in, and you reduce your splits there. Once they learn it like that, then it's universal, right? You can use it with any formation, and you don't have to go back and reteach it. I think that's the biggest thing is being able to teach things and compartmentalize things within your installs is a huge part of that. Don't just install the play that you're using that day. install the concept. And once you've installed that concept, the kids can correlate to it when you come back 2 or 3 weeks later and say, hey, remember when we put Sting in for this game? Hey, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do it out of these 2 formations this week, and okay, it's not new teaching now. It's just a variation. It's easy for them to understand it and then go out and do it. And so that part of it's huge. Just having a plan of attack when you install things is big. And like I said earlier, we kind of go back to the whole part whole, install theory of teaching. And Coach Coling, our offense coordinator, has done a really good job. And we've kind of worked hand in hand in our install plan of designing a plan of attack for how we're going to do it. Hey, base formations, base plays, and throwing maybe a lot at them early, understanding that maybe we're not going to master it by the time we move on to another scheme, but we can go out and do it. And then we can clean it up as we go. And then once we feel like we've got things to a point where we're doing it fairly clean and our guys understand those concepts, okay, now let's go back in and really dive into what we want to be good at. Let's clean it up. And then we can start to add variations to that as well. And having a plan that's detailed, having a plan that's organized, it's always going to change. We may have a plan for a 10-day install and only get through, the first 4 or 5 days before we say, hey, look, we got to put a pause on it. Let's catch up a little bit and then reevaluate where we're at. And so just that constant evaluation of, what your guys are good at, how you're doing it, and being okay with being flexible, I think throughout some of those installs is important. But for us, the biggest thing is just having that concepts and installing from a conceptual standpoint has been really, really big for us.
Coach, to wrap things up, for our high school coaches out there who have those players who are looking to play at the next level, what could a place like Hutchinson, colleges like yours at the junior college level, do for a player today, especially as we've talked about this transfer portal era where it's easier to take a guy from this school over here, maybe than a high school guy, and develop him?
Yeah, I think the thing that we've seen, especially over the last couple of years, is the FBS schools, right now, they're not recruiting kids with development in mind. They're getting guys that are ready to play. And that's just the nature of the beast right now. And so I think that's really where junior college has kind of stepped its game up, is we know what we are. And from the get-go, we're all about development. Whether that's academic development, whether it's athletic development, social, whatever it is. That's what we hang our hat on. That's what we've been designed to do from the very get-go of our existence as junior college football programs. And so when that's not, development's really not at the top of the mind, for a lot of these big-time schools, I think that's where junior college comes into play is, hey, you're getting an opportunity, if you come to Hutch or really any other junior college program across the country, to get in and be developed early in your career with the focus, being on playing time early in that career, and that's going to make guys more marketable. And that developmental phase has been transitioned to a lot of the smaller level programs, and I think for us, and a lot of people, just in all honesty, there's a lot of Division IIs and FCS schools that are still saying, hey, if you can't go to that FBS school right now, you can come here and get the transfer portal and get out, and we'll do the development, but really for us, we can only have guys for 2 seasons, and we want them to get out. I think at those other levels, they may be able to keep them for 3 or 4 at the end of the day. And so for us, we have to maximize your time and your development within a 6 to 18 month window, and there's no other choice. And then it's our job to get you out and get you placed and invite coaches to get on our campus and see you face to face and watch you practice and send out our film to them and try to get you moved on, and I really think that's where junior college has separated itself from a lot of the other levels right now. If a kid's good enough to play at the FBS level, but maybe is just not getting that opportunity because of the transfer portal. 5 years ago, guys were taking 25 high school guys a class, and now that number's probably down to, 5 to 10, maybe 12 kids, on a big high school class for an FBS program. And so we're getting a lot of those guys that just need that additional opportunity, need that additional exposure. They can get developed really well at a program like ours, and then they're getting that platform to move on, better than any other level in the country because of our recruiting rules, and just those 4-year coaches can come in and watch our practices live. You can't get that at a lot of other programs and levels of college football. So that's been really big for us. And I think when you look at like the transfer portal, when those FBS programs are taking players, they're not taking guys that have sat the bench or not played a whole lot of reps in games. They need guys that have played meaningful game reps. As a young guy that's coming into a program, you're coming into a junior college program, like you're only competing with other freshmen and sophomores for playing time, and so that part of it I think is really intriguing to a lot of guys is I can come get that game film early in my career and I've only got to compete against other freshmen and sophomores to do it. It's not a deal where I got to compete against a fourth or a fifth year senior to get some of that film early in my career to be able to move on to that next level.
Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time, sharing some insight with us on the things that you do to build your program, and best of luck to you and the Blue Dragons as you defend your national championship here in 2025.
I appreciate it, Keith. Thanks a lot, and thanks for having me on. Appreciate all you do for the game.
That brings us to the end of this Best of 2025 conversation with Drew Dallas, head coach of the 2024 NJCAA Division I National Champions. What stands out is how clearly his ideas translate across levels, standards stay firm, teaching stays clear, identity adapts to people without losing structure. If you want to go deeper and apply this episode to your own program, explore our Coach and Coordinator AI. The companion helps you reflect on your constraints, pressure test your culture, and evaluate teaching and install decisions using only the principles shared in this conversation. For more conversations like this, along with access to communities like the Mushroom Society and the Air Raid War Room, visit coachandcoordinator.com. Thanks for listening.